Well, good evening, good evening, good evening. Can we believe it is already Friday, the 3rd of April, 2026? Where has a third of this year gone? I'll tell you where it's gone for me. Quite frankly, it's gone in working with Access to Work. You know who I am. I'm MJ Lace. I am founder of Accessibility Partners and Inclusion. And what do we do in AP? Well, we help people to create a life that they deem is worth living through the power of workfulness. Work education and training and creating a life that we deem is worth living is what everything we are about. We're about inclusion, about people of determination, people of lived experience, those that move through the world with some form of disability. And as always on First Friday Live, not only do you get Paralympians and TV presenters and just amazing people like our strongest disabled man, remember, that we had just a couple of episodes ago. But we also need to find out some information, don't we? It's not just about celebrating the great things that we do in our disability services or our circles. Now, I'm in Wales, as you know, and one day in Wales, as I came back from shopping, I met somebody. I won't tell you where. It was in a social setting. We'll just say that. And I met somebody, and I'm going to introduce him to you in a moment. Now, you probably already know his name on account of the fact that if you can read scrolling along the bottom of this, it says that we are in First Friday Live at 5, and I am going to be live with none other than Dane Marks. Now I'm going to leave Dane to introduce himself to you, but we have an hour together. And let me tell you, if you don't know about what your rights and responsibilities are in terms of your own disability or how you move through the world, well, we have the man of the moment to share that with you. We're going to have a real nice chat together for about an hour. I've got some really challenging questions for Dane. But before I get into that, I will introduce him, bring him onto the stage, and delight him delight you with his presence, or delight him with your presence. I'm not sure which. If you are online, please do make a comment. I can see all the comments, whether we are on LinkedIn or on YouTube, or you're here, or you're even looking in the studio, or you're watching later when this is turned into a video cast or a podcast. Both happen. Have a look for the Accessibility Partners and Inclusion podcast. I think we're on something, I don't know. Episodes might be about 30 now. I think we might be on about 30 episodes, considering I thought that I might make one episode and then see how I felt. We're pretty much getting there. A couple of years' time, I'll be saying it's our 400th episode. So let's introduce Dane and have him as part of the Accessibility Partners and Inclusion podcast, videocast, and First Friday Live. I always like to use our social media footage as many times as we can. I hope you're excited. I am. Here's Dane. Good afternoon.
Well, afternoon.
How are you? How are you?
Hello, all listeners as well, and to your audience. Really, really beautiful pleasure to be invited. What a beautiful introduction. Thank you very much.
Yeah, do you know what? It's my pleasure, and I could wax lyrical for many, many more months about you, let alone with you. But I'm really grateful you came, and thank you for giving up your time on this Good Friday. It couldn't be a better Friday, really, than today for you to be coming. So before I ask you a bazillion questions over the next hour, it's nearly a bazillion, might be a few less. First of all, before we get into the giving people value, who are you? Who's Dane?
Good question. I'm still trying to work that one out myself. So I go under many different hats, but they all interlink. So my name is Reverend Dane Marks, and I am the founder of the National Community Law Project, CIC. And I've been running that since 2020. And I'm also disabled, as you're aware, and have disabilities, and I'm a strong advocate for disability rights. And also, me and you have spoken quite a lot of time around disability rights and people's rights, and something which I'm really, really passionate about, as well as many other things. So my journey kind of started in law around about 2019. I went back to university quite late to study a law degree, which was something I was always pondering for several years. But everyone told me it was boring and don't bother, and it's not really going to be the way to go forward. But I decided to go and do it, and I've got to be honest, I absolutely loved it. But in the process of my law degree, which I started in 2019, I also bumped into another guy. We was doing a project together, actually helping a political party set up in Wales. And he was also working on it. He was part of the Student Union in Cardiff, also finishing his, I believe, his final year in law. And so we met up, and then we were having a chat. He's like, "Oh, we'd really like to set up a drop-in centre because students couldn't get experience in law whilst they were studying their law degree." So the original plan was to set up a drop-in centre. I thought that'd be really good, serve a community need, and work that way. And that was in early 2020. And then so we got everything set up, and I think it was around about mid-October time, where we were deciding, and by that time we'd accumulated about 20 law students and graduates from Cardiff University as well, to go in and set up this law centre. So we were really close, and we had everything set up. And then, if you remember, we went back into lockdown in October.
We did.
Yes, so awful experience. So, so my response now was, well, let's just wait until we come out of lockdown, and then we'll set up and we'll just do it after lockdown. Said that, saying, but their response was, let's just do everything online. Now, at the time there, I was still typing with one finger, so that was a panic attack for me. But we did, and so within a very short space of time, we piloted the organisation online, and we literally went national like overnight. It was quite surprising. I didn't realise the impact, which I'll explain now shortly, of the issues that we're facing. So as a result, within like literally the first month, 6 weeks, we ended up with over 250 law students then in 2020. And we were literally helping hundreds of clients at that time. And then I realized how big the need was. And then I started researching the struggles and trying to find out what we were doing. And the decision from there led on with me and my co-directors at the time, and the other partners, were to set up a CIC company, a community interest company, a social enterprise to fill a community need. Because by that time we'd really realized the pressures that were on people trying to get legal support, not able to. And I'll explain the reasons why shortly. And we incorporated as the National Community Law Project, CIC. And since that time, we've onboarded up around about, I think we're on about 1,100 law students and graduates, which is pretty phenomenal if you look at the national space. And we've also served thousands of people with legal support. By that way, then they get the experience. So our constitution is number one, to give law students experience, so they can go on and work in solicitor firms on the traditional route. I also expand their horizons, that it's not just a traditional route you can go down, such as being a solicitor, a barrister, or silex, but you can also go down other routes, such as in hospitality and business or construction and then type of things, who will employ somebody with a qualifying law degree in order to protect that business interests. In order because once you've got a law degree, it's an extremely valuable resource to somebody, to an organization or to individuals as we serve, or to if they go down a traditional route. But you should never really be in unemployment if you've got a degree in law.
No, absolutely not. In terms of law, for me, it's been a sticky journey as a disabled person with a grade 2 listed 18th century building that needed a through the floor lift, for example, or adaptations to a vehicle. I mean, there's a myriad of things, including my children's education. All 3 of my children that I made and the 2 I fostered all have neurodivergence or disabilities. So even navigating the education system as an adult, accessing the education system for me and getting the reasonable adjustments, because I'm a full-time wheelchair user, have all really been, hugely challenging. And I think the word in the middle of all of it actually is the opposite of what I'm going to ask you, but the word is injustice. I feel that all of my life, and I'm 55 now, that magic 5 and 5, 55 years have been unjust. And so I guess my first question, and it's a big one. I'm sorry to throw quite a huge subject at you in the first instance, but I guess my question is for everybody that's listening and for me and you, what do you think the word justice means? What is justice and why is it important?
Well, I think if I just explain what have actually happened first, or what the problems we face, and why
Yes,
you feel,
absolutely.
and many, well, over 3.6 million people are facing the issues you're facing right now. So if I just explain the problems, so
Yeah.
the first problem which we got is there's no compulsory education in law, MJ. So there's no compulsory education in law or in higher education. Now that's a major issue considering law governs the way we live our life. So originally it used to be religion that governed the way we lived, and that was replaced by law and centuries of law. And because we don't have a fundamental understanding and it's not taught in mainstream education, the issue happens then is because people just generally do not know what they know. They got some rights, but they don't know what their rights are. They don't understand the civil responsibilities, and they definitely do not understand the legal system until they hit it. So that's the first problem we've identified. Now, the second problem which we've identified as well is the legal system wasn't designed for persons and litigants. The legal system itself, the whole language, like legalese, and the way the system is designed, was written for lawyers by lawyers. So if we look at, for instance, if you've got civil procedure rules, so we look at the civil procedure rules which were introduced early 2000s. Then we've got all the case law which goes back centuries, as well as legislation which has been imposed and been enacted in order to run a democratic society. And we've also got then the Legal Services Act 2007. So all of these were designed pre something called the LASPO Act, the Legal Aid, Sentence and Punishment of Offenders Act 2012. So the base design of the system, which have gone on for centuries, was written for lawyers by lawyers. So the LASPO Act, when that came into force, what it done is restricted legal aid because there was always legal aid available for cases.
There was.
And they
Not now.
So they restricted it. Well, it's gone to the point of where the system itself is going to collapse unless something happens. We got over 65 million cases in the backlog of cases in the Crown Court alone. We've got something over 300,000 cases in tribunals, employment tribunals, still outstanding at the moment. We've got 3.6 million people who cannot get legal support at all in the UK because of something called legal aid deserts. And that's because they've restricted funding from places like law centres, certain citizens advice bureaus, other areas as well, and legal support agencies, charities set up to support organisations. And the lack of funding is reducing that. So we end up with whole geographical areas with no legal support at all within there. And then you've also got like a further 50 million people we know of at the moment who are not getting adequate legal support. Now, in a democratic society, the justice system is supposed to be fair and equal. So the issue which you've got once you've got all them restrictions is then you've got people who have got potential cases. There's nothing they can really do about that case, MJ, unless they go and present it because solicitors' fees are too high, or they believe they're too high. You've got to pay a couple of £100 just for the consultation. And then you've got the other impact as well, then, of you've got to weigh up the pros and cons of what's happening yourself. So if you can't do it, you become something called the person in litigant, which means you've got to navigate yourself through that entire legal process, whatever that is. And that's the main problem which we're hitting with, because the justice system was never designed and not really been improved for persons in litigants. So they've got to learn the civil procedure rules. Now, the consequences, like the civil procedure rules, which you mentioned earlier on, of not getting it right means that it can adversely go against you. You can have additional cost orders, which people can't afford. They can have their case thrown out if they don't fill out the right forms. They can have other sanctions put up against them. So there's a lot of severe consequences that can impact people after the fact. Of them becoming persons and litigants as well. So they've got to learn our system and even before they go into it. So our job is always to let them know, there are formalities you're gonna have to follow. And if you're up against an unfair advantage, such as a business who have got insurance and solicitors, everything else, and you haven't got that kind of money, and they know how to navigate the system, it puts you at a substantial disadvantage. And then if you've got a disability, that impacts that as well, such as the mobility issues, like trying to navigate and get into the courts themselves, as well as the time it'll take in order for you to get there, the cost implications and everything else. Plus then the demand of having to make sure all them forms that you've got all the right evidence, that you're submitting the right forms, you're drafting your witness statements, you're drafting your particulars of claim, the whole system behind that, the standard process which you're going for. On top of the actual issue itself. So for instance, if you've got a housing disrepair issue, and you're living there and you've got health issues yourself, so just making this specific around disability, that you've got a health issue and you've got housing disrepair, mold, which is impacting your health as well, and you're trying to get that sorted, as well as then you might have a landlord who doesn't want to do anything, so you're trying to navigate that situation as well, as well as then trying to navigate the court issue as well, which is a complete universe within itself. It even can confuse legal professionals. So yeah, absolutely. So you can imagine what it does to somebody with no formal training or legal training, and we're expected to navigate their own courses, their own cases, sorry. So you've got all these kind of issues going on, and then what judges need to do then with persons and litigants, they've got to remain fair and impartial. A lot of people think we're like Judge Judy and inquisitorial, but we're not. We're an adversarial nation, and we're an adversarial legal system, which means basically you present your argument, your case to a judge, the other person presents it to the judge, and the judge might ask questions here and there, but ultimately they're listening to both cases, see who's got the best argument, and weighing up the balance of probabilities to try and make a fair outcome. In the meantime, now what judges also got to do is they've also got to explain now to persons litigants how to navigate their case, because a lot of problems happen, wrong forms submitted, things ain't done on time, people don't know how to present themselves or present their case in court, or got misunderstandings about procedure and that. And that's a massive impact on the actual person, but it's also an impact on the legal system itself. And this is what causes the massive delays which we've got, because now judges are expected to navigate persons and litigants and apply the law as the law is, which is not made or not written for persons and litigants. And then the person litigant is faced with all these challenges of trying to navigate the legal system and trying to navigate them situations as they're going along, which have led to our system, our legal system, leading into, and there's much more I can go into, obviously, but on the basis for your audience, that's the problem. So we always try to make sure people try to avoid court. Another thing which is really important that people need to understand is that the funding in the legal system is pretty steep. I am not a regulated insurance advisor, but what I would say to people is, if you have got a home insurance policy, or if you don't use it, it's always good to speak with your insurance providers about legal expense insurance. It's usually attached to some. If you've got home insurance, homeowner businesses will know that they've been advised properly, to make sure that they've got that cover, which can provide you up to about £100,000 to £250 to cover some forms of legal or foreseeable legal things. But you have to go to an insurance provider to understand that. But if people can again make sure they got that attachment to their home insurance, it's a huge benefit. If I can say anything, just make sure you've got indemnity just in case. Most people will face a legal issue at some point in their life.
Absolutely, particularly people of
some more than others.
Absolutely, yes, some more than others, and for different reasons. But the other thing I was thinking about, just as you were speaking, is that the individuals that I support, and in the main, this isn't a carte blanche opinion about disabled people, but those that are marginalised, ostracised, kept out, as it were, from the system, or in poor housing, all of those kind of results of inequality, they're going to be the least likely people to be capable of being a person in litigant, right? because they're very likely not to have been to university. They're very likely not to have that electronic IT, using a computer, being able to put bundles and paginate and number and paragraph and collate information. So there's no wonder there's all those delays. And I agree with you regarding the judges, that in the last time I was in court, I felt that the judge was thoroughly fed up, really, with the fact that he has to sit and explain every single, last thing that really for him is quite boring. And as somebody that works in industries, again, that other people are excluded from, so whether it's higher education and disabled students allowance, you'll probably know about that. For individuals that are disabled, there are reasonable adjustments and beyond reasonable adjustments that can be made, but that's a minefield of its own. Access to work, which is part of my necessary experience, and also how I help people to achieve a life that they deem is worth living. But in all of those, I'm aware that my customers, my clients, do not have a Scooby about the process, and it's a massive learning curve. So the idea of understanding the court system, but plus your own issue. For example, when you were thinking about talking about the mold in the house, and I knew people with kiddies with asthma, terrible asthma, who were in poor housing, and that asthma was impacting, meaning that they needed nebulizers and overnight, ventilators, you name it, as a direct result of inequality in housing. And yet, of course, there's no legal aid. Now, we've alluded to a few of them, but what do you think are the most common legal issues people experience? And I agree about the housing, by the way, about the insurance. Every time I get insurance, every time they always say to me, I think it used to be about £12, but for an extra however much, would you like legal cover? And I always go, yeah, I'll have that. And they go, would you like? Yeah, I'll have that. Would you like? Yeah, I'll have that. And I do. I just say, yep, I'll have that and that and that and that. And to be honest, do I go and check what that means? No, I don't. I don't have a clue what that means in my insurance. So I'm going to go and check my insurance after this, about 6 o'clock ish. I'm going to go and check my insurance because I have a feeling I'm not using what I've paid for.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
What else do you think, apart from, I've already talked about HE, something I'm having to take, I'm afraid, higher education complaints procedure internally, and very shortly, I would imagine, the Office for the Independent Adjudicator, and maybe beyond that. That's just on a personal level. And then, my own access to work experience, which has been a long time award, but in the last 5 years has been cut massively. So there's definitely employment, there's definitely education. But I mean, you've already talked about things like debt and contracts, haven't you? And housing, benefits. I mean, there's so many areas, isn't there?
Yeah.
That's without divorce or family situations.
Yeah. Right? Divorce is really is on a massive increase at the moment.
Certainly is.
As opposed to
COVID hasn't helped that, right? Thinking about you starting up in COVID, and the fact that when we went into lockdown the second time, it closed our offices. It had to. We could have no clients, and therefore there was no point in having staff. Therefore, there was no point in having an office. And in actual fact, that's now led to our entire business being online and us using a customer records management system. It's amazing how the world changes. If anybody had told me, or the Department for Education 5 years ago, that we'd have been totally online, they never would have believed it. But alluding to the fact that we're all intimidated, I'm intimidated by the legal system, and I'm a trainee social worker. I've done my social work law exams, right, and passed them. Goodness knows how. I think it's because it was open book, to be honest. But considering I find it intimidating, and I like to think that I'm a relatively intelligent, articulate person, why do you think people are overwhelmed and intimidated by the system, and how do we break that barrier down? Apart from what we're doing now.
It's really, really important. So on that specific question, the reason why people are intimidated by the legal system is because everyone believes they got a case, which is fine, and most people have for specific reasons. If they cannot get access, which most people can't, and I can say that quite comfortably. that and they can't get access to legal support. The issue which happens is they end up going into that system without knowing and understanding it. So once they hit it, that's where the big problems start happening. So the confidence beforehand, and we've got to try and manage people's expectations within the National Community Law Project, is please don't go into it expecting it's going to be it's like an easy process, because it really isn't. And a lot of people go into that with that expectation. And it's good to be confident, but it's also good not to just proceed on that basis.
Realistic.
Yes, realistic. But then when they actually hit the system and they see how much it is involved, it's extremely administration heavy. So you're asked number one, and you're asked number one to make sure that you got everything prepared. A lot of people don't, if they don't get support beforehand. And so they'll go in there, they'll fill an M1 claim form out, submit that over, draft a defence statement or a particular claims themselves, and submit some evidence in which they think is relevant. And they tend to find out then it's really not. Then they understand that the implications of what goes on, plus the length of time because of the backlogs. People think it's going to get in front of a judge really, really quickly. It doesn't work that way. So if you haven't been to court before, specifically civil court, if you haven't been to civil courts before, which assist in family matters, any non-criminal matters, so family matters, contract, consumer rights, debts, them type of things, and you're going to the civil court, it's you have several hearings typically before you get to your actual trial date. And lots of things got to be prepared from there, not just witness statements, but also disclosures, depending on what track you are. And there's a lot of things that got to happen. I mean, that process different with different cases. So it's extremely administration heavy. Plus, then you're dealing with the other side's details as well, and the way the other side is going to be navigating that case as well. So it takes a very small space of time, and we always try to manage people's expectations before they go to any kind of tribunal or before they go to any kind of court. That these are the things that you should prepare or have prepared before you go, and you need to understand the process for your specific claim of what is likely to go on within the management of that process. And so if they come to us, we tend to be able to help them and to expect that. But every single person I know, once they hit the court, I think I've probably had about 10 people who have been extremely comfortable, and that's because of they've had prior experience with legal proceedings. Probably be a bit more than that, but just off the top of my head, I can think of that, and that's with the thousands of people we've helped, and the hundreds who have actually gone to court as a result. And then, but they always get majorly stressed, and I mean to the point of where they're trying to contact me early hours in the morning, that type of stuff. It really does hit people hard. That's why the stress happens, because once they hit that system, they realise the seriousness of it and the consequences that if they get it wrong, it can have detrimental effects. But also, it's also good to point out here the limitations of the courts as well in certain aspects. So if, for instance, if you go for the civil court, you could win a claim, and then you've got the enforcement procedures then after. So the the 4 processes of enforcement after you win a claim, so if you're successful, is you can instruct bailiffs, you can do an attachment of earnings, you can do a charging order on somebody's property, or you could do a third-party order, which is if they run a business or they got clients, you can ask them to pay you instead of them. But they're really the main points. So, and they've all got their own structure and they've all got their own challenges. So it could get to the point of where you win a claim, and then if somebody's unwilling to pay, then you've got to pay furthermore in order to get the further enforcement in place. And you can't always guarantee success that way. So you could spend years in court and then spend a couple of years trying to chase the debt as well. Because
that's why it's intimidating, isn't it? I mean, it's intimidating just listening to it, let alone navigating it. And I find exactly the same with any other access to government structures, particularly the individuals that I support. Now, as we've already explained how confusing and overwhelming and quite frankly, too much information all at once and lots of different options, and even outcomes. I mean, I've heard of people, again, as you've just said, who've got an award from a long drawn out case, but then again, it's taken more money almost than they've ended up with at the end, and certainly it's affected their lives to the point where a lady just the other day said to me, you know, it probably it was a risk to her life, and it definitely challenged her relationship, and that she wasn't sure she would end up remaining in that relationship. She did, thankfully, but she walked away. She walked away from an employment tribunal because she felt her health and well-being was more important than the point, even though at the point when she went to it, it was the most important thing that she felt she was ever doing, but soon walked away with the pressure. And if it's that much pressure, and yet we can't access any support financially to access a system that's almost inaccessible, what options are available for people who can't afford whatever it costs for a barrister, a solicitor team? Are there any options if there's no legal aid? What can people do?
So one of the things I would stress, the most important thing is to make sure you've got some kind of legal cover on your thing. That's an important one on the insurance.
House insurance, yes.
Yes, and it's usually on attachments with house insurance, or motor insurance. Some credit cards as well do different insurance.
Yeah, banks. Some banks have it.
Banks as well. Yeah, absolutely. So it's always good to make sure that's an additional, because legal issues, you know, everyone will face a legal issue at some point in their life, statistically.
Absolutely.
So you know, all being associated with a legal issue. So I think that's the one. The other one is if you, yeah, and the other thing which is really important for you to make sure you've got is, a lot of people sign up to these contracts. So I know we've touched on housing briefly, but there's other areas as well. So there's family disputes, which can be awful. Now at the moment, what we know is 80% of people who are in family disputes, one of them is at least one of them is a person litigant. That's huge. So 80% of family cases, at least one of them is a person litigant. So that's a substantial disadvantage, whilst the other one could be represented, or is probably going to be represented by somebody, by some legal professional.
Yeah, it's a massive
that's
a massive disadvantage.
Yes,
if one side's supported and the other isn't, it's an unfair game before you begin.
Absolutely. And it's also making sure then, so if you have got, so that's family court, for instance, and we've also got like contracts, which is a really big thing. So as a consumer to business relationship, always check your contracts to make sure what the terms and conditions are. You'll tend to find in some contracts they got some like unfair contract terms in them, which, and if they are deemed as unfair, and the Consumer Rights Act for consumers, you can challenge them and have them struck out as being unfair. But then you can also make sure that everything that you're signing. So, for instance, if you're bringing a building into your house in order to do some repairs, always make sure that you have got a contract which is put together, a written contract of some sort that you understand, and it can be in plain English or it can be in legalese. But either way, just so it's a clear set out of what the obligations are going to be. It's worth doing that in order, just in case. So our philosophy is expect the best, but always plan for the worst. Because that way you're always covered, yeah. And ensure evidence is the biggest thing with people, so that you always get an evidence trail of what is actually going on. Because then if any action do need to be taken, then it can be taken quite comfortably, and you'll appreciate the work, that the small amount of work it takes to build up a little folder of evidence, and to use it in the future, as opposed to not letting that go and try to get things written down, especially where there's a cost element involved. So that if you do need to kind of claim any kind of cost back or damages or anything like that, that you've got that ability. And my biggest advice on that as well, so touching on that, there's also a lot of issues with employment law. Like I said, I think earlier on, I believe it's over 300,000, could even be 600,000. I'll have to check them statistics, backlog in the tribunal court alone. which employment tribunals are set up in order for specific areas of law, such as employment. And but the good thing with ACAS is ACAS actually do a really good job. We need to have more systems like that in place, which we need to be campaigning with the government for, which we will be doing shortly. Because ACAS, typically about 72% of claims are going to ACAS don't end up getting dealt with ACAS alone without going to a tribunal, and 79% with ACAS get settled after it's been employment after the employment tribunal.
Right.
So so
That's conciliation, isn't it?
Pre-employment tribunal, sorry. ACAS are really, really good at sorting out employment issues. They're very, very good at it. So we need more systems like that in place. Ombudsman service is set up for businesses such as energy, housing, some government departments as well will typically have ombudsman services, which are free services that you can go to. You can register a complaint with them if you don't get the resolution sorted. So there are options out there without going to the courts. The courts really should be the last option, and the tribunal, but and employment tribunals and that type of thing, in order to get that sorted.
So that's really helpful, and I think that again, even when it comes to ombudsman or those kind of processes beyond complaining internally, I think they can be overwhelming, a lot of learning and a whole new area. From your work with the National Community Law Project, I guess my question is, I can see the patterns occurring. For example, there are, I think something like 44,000 cases being waiting to be heard in access to work. We've got a 44-week wait for any reconsideration, 60 weeks for any change of circumstances, almost 2 years for a self-employed person who has a change of circumstance or a change in their need, for anyone to even open the application that they've put in to access to work, which is of course the Department for Works and Pensions. I can see those patterns. And obviously I see some in children and families as well, being a trainee social worker. What kind of systems do you see people failing at most? And I know we might be repeating ourselves, but where do you think the biggest challenges in those systems? Is it housing? Is it education? Is it family? You alluded to the 80% of people that have a personal litigant in the family. That sounds to me quite dangerous.
It really is. It's not a good place to be into, because it's a huge impact on the family. I think where it hits most is probably family cases, but also employment law as well. Employment is a really big thing for people, and if they're not being treated fairly, or there's issues going on, or they're being victims of workplace bullying or breaches of the Equality Act Section 6 for disability and discrimination and that type of thing. And that's a huge, to move it, somebody's job, somebody's family, somebody's home. These are huge things. So it really depends on the circumstances. There's a huge amount of family cases is probably the most that come to the project. So there's a lot of family cases that will come through. I think that's the largest section. I think second to that would probably be employment. There's a huge rise in employment case at the moment, hence the backlog in the tribunals for people not being treated fairly, unfair wages, unfair dismissal, constructive dismissal, other areas as well that dismissal under the Equality Act, breaches of the Equality Act, wrongful dismissal. So there's a range of different issues that come over in employment as well. And they all bring their own challenges, in order to, they all bring their own challenges to different people in different ways.
And I think
also an increase in repos. I don't know whether that's just us, but repossessions, home repossessions from banks or loan advisors, that seems to be increasing at the moment as well.
Does it? And I mean, it was like that in the 80s, wasn't it? We had a huge housing crisis when mortgages were oversold, and people were underprepared to pay for them. And then the interest rates went up just to make sure that people couldn't keep their house. I mean, everywhere feels like there's injustice. Okay, I can think of employment situations right now. I mean, it sounds, the phrase 10 a penny sounds a bit throwaway, but literally I can think of 10 as I sit here now of people that, as I alluded to just a few minutes ago, who were unfairly treated, were unfairly dismissed, were excluded, went to go and do something about it, and found it really overwhelming. But for those people that have never gone down that route, that haven't gone to court, that haven't taken their employer to any task for what's going on, people that are sitting quietly, and they are in silence, many of them frightened to even speak up about the most heinous situations that are occurring, both in employment and in other areas. What would be the first steps that you would take if you're sitting now and you're going, well, actually, I'm being bullied. I'm not going to have my job in a few weeks, I don't think. I think they're going to try and get rid of me. What do you do? What's the first step?
The first step is always seek advice where you can. So although we've got legal aid deserts, the National Community Law Project, we're primarily an online service. You can contact us at any time. Citizens Advice, really, really good as well. They are limited in their capacity of what they can do. But you've also got law centres as well. Law centres tend to be solicitors who work on pro bono cases. You've also got some other pro bono people as well. With us, we're law graduates and legal advisors, and what we do is we assist people primarily from low income, vulnerable and marginalised areas with legal support. Sorry.
No. Sorry, someone went off. I'm sorry, I've brought you here live with when you're not very well.
It's this vape, it's terrible. Yes, and so like we help where our services are pretty low, very low cost. We are a community interest company, and we help people with that kind of access, and it's good to get that kind of advice. So if you get advice first, then you'll know the route you can take, what's going to be expected from you, to present your case. What you, for instance, if it was an employment case, what's been happening with it? If it's a landlord and tenant, what's been happening, what documentation have you got? If they send you text messages, have they sent you emails, have you corresponded with everything in writing, that kind of stuff, and then kind of compile it that way. With that kind of support, then you'll be able to know and be advised on what route you can take, and then whether you can move that, you could or should move that forward.
Yeah, could or should. So that getting that early advice and putting together what might be called, I don't know, an evidence pack or a timeline of what's happened, or a chronology. I think I've had it referred to.
Evidence bundle,
what happened, when, where, and why, or not even why, but what happened, when, and where, and to whom. There's definitely still a gap between knowing what to do, being told that information, and then knowing what to do with that information. Is there not a gap? And I would say, how do you address, once you've prepared somebody and said, look, go get your evidence, let's write it all down. I mean, I know it depends on the area, but if they can't afford, a barrister, a solicitor, whatever it is you need, and I'm not an expert, how do we overcome that gap between, okay, I've got my evidence, I know what's happened, I'm still sitting at work, I'm still being bullied, what do I do next? What do I do with that?
So with us, so for instance, the National Community Law Project is set up to build that, to bridge that gap. So for instance, what we would do is, if you had all the evidence, we would help you compile whatever official complaint. Our complaints are extremely very well put together.
Comprehensive, they are.
Because we have quite multiple legal minds on it. And that if that needs to go to a formal person, such as the landlord first, or depending what situation it is, we kind of put all that together for you, knowing what the evidence is actually saying and referencing off the evidence, do the legal analysis, and then let them know this can potentially happen. If you do, as a person litigant, go to court, then we can kind of support you based on the information that you give us, so we can help with the drafting of particulars of claim, the filing forms, that kind of stuff. Make sure all that's done professionally in a manner that's going to be easy for the judge digest, or that whoever's feeding that at the moment.
Saves time, doesn't it? Which must make them less irritated.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because there is a huge backlog, as we've discussed several times. So, the amount of time that it takes for somebody to navigate a case fairly is overwhelming for all parties.
Of course, I'll tell you what I'm thinking. What I've always said, because I was born with disabilities, is that, my job in life actually is to teach people how to be disabled. Now, people say, what do you mean, teach me how to be disabled? I'm not disabled. No, but we're either disabled or yet to be disabled. And I'll see you down the road, because not very many people die well in their sleep. That sounds quite negative. But when I talk about learning to be disabled, I honestly think, and I'm sure you're going to agree with me, and maybe, expand on it a bit, but if we don't know our rights or our responsibilities or how we act when we're broken, or we need to access health services or whatever, surely education plays a part in this. We all go to school. There might not be statutory requirement to go to school, but we all seem to go somewhere, even if it's learning at home. Surely this should be part of education, shouldn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, the legal system should be free to access. It's a fundamental part of a democratic society, and this is and the issue which we've had a lot of legal professionals as well as charities and the legal aid society, legal aid services, and so many different people are campaigning on this from a legal perspective. Because it's absolutely ridiculous at the fact that we are governed by law, and like I said, not just our rights but also our responsibilities, and it's not a compulsory education subject, but we're still bound by it. So that can tell you whether we're going to be free if we do something, or whether we're not going to be free, whether we can do it or whether we can't. But they're not teaching it in schools. And I think it's more down, I would have said it was more down to oversight previously, but enough information have gone out there. I've been saying the same thing for years, not just myself, but other partner organisations and other law charities and legal services have campaigned harsh on this for years. You've got to give people an education in law, and you've also got to simplify the process. There's no point in having archaic legislation that have not been updated, which they're trying to do, trying to update it to a more standard. But we're talking centuries of legislation. It's got to be in an understanding, so people can access and understand it, but also know how to understand it. Which is the whole point of the education. It's a huge gap, and without it, the legal system, which it currently is in the process of now, will fail in the UK. And the worst thing about it, MJ, is our legal system have been the template for over 100 countries in the world. We are the leading on law. And the separation, we do the separation of powers, of course, where we got parliament, and then we got the crown, and then we got law, and it all was supposed to balance everything out. But what parliament have done is made it inaccessible, so then people cannot get the representation the system was designed to produce. Then expects uneducated people who've not been trained in law to navigate themselves through that system, which was written by lawyers for lawyers.
For lawyers. Absolutely.
It's an absolute joke, and it does need to be addressed. And then we've got some silly policies going in, such as David Lammy, the Justice Minister, who wants to now take away trial by jury. So it just says a fundamental concept that you just don't know what you're talking about. You're doing it the wrong way. So basically, you want to put judges in a position where they're going to have their own inherent bias in order to make decisions on cases without jury, which should have the right to have a jury on it, or the jury of your peers. So
it should be a jury of peers. It's a fundamental, a fundament of British law, isn't it?
So you watch this,
trial.
Yeah, and we watch this. The black belt barrister is really good. They say if somebody haven't followed him yet, he does a lot of public good information for the general public. work as well. Really, really good guy. Daniel Chen Smith.
I'd love to see that.
And several other people as well.
Of course.
So they do a lot of campaigning as well as with us and other public figures as well, who basically have campaigned. Who's we're looking at them as we just scratch our heads thinking, what exactly are you, what's your end game here? What are you trying to do?
Where does this end?
Yeah, because what needs to happen is the justice system needs to be free and accessible for all people. That's what needs to happen, because that system is put in place through centuries in order to make sure that everybody is equal and fair, and whether people are right or whether they're wrong, but they've got the fair footing in order to have access to justice, which is the fundamental guidance system on how we live our lives and govern our lives in a Western democracy in the UK. That's what needs to happen. It will change, because the good thing, especially with these up and coming lawyers and some of the senior lawyers as well who've been over there, they will change things. We will all change things together collectively, because I think it's getting to the point that we have just had enough of the nonsense. So we will just deal with things. I think it's time now, and I can see a lot of law firms, chambers, young advocates, passionate ones coming up now, experienced barristers who are just like, look, especially after this last one, I think it was kind of the tipping edge, with the Lammy trying to pass this now through Parliament. I think people have now just had enough, so we'll just deal with it. But it's something that has to be dealt with. Really, it should have been dealt with a few years ago. We kind of hoped, I think, people would just realise and just get better. Considering our Prime Minister is also the former Deputy of Public Prosecutions, understands the law, legally trained, and then they're passing these kind of legislation through, and it bewilders me. It just sits there, and everyone else, probably 95% of the legal industry who understands what's going on, would probably be sitting there saying, this is, well, I know the ones I know are. Just sitting there, we've kind of had enough of this now. It's kind of gone so silly, and it's just it's all wrong. It all needs to change, so it does need to change, and we will make it happen.
I think I refer to disability inclusion as utter madness, because I'm gonna state something now. I actually think that if he knows better, he should do better. And if he knows better, but he isn't doing better, that would tell me that it's deliberate. That's what I'd say about my summary. If I know that somebody has the information and the education, but they're acting in opposition to that information and education, then the only thing I can bring that down to is a decision. Now, if people don't understand what their rights and responsibilities are, how can we have a civil society where people know how to make choices based on the information they've got? And I'd say as well that feeds into not just law, but look at financial systems. We have so many people in debt. Why? Well, in my opinion, because nobody's even taught how to run a bank account at school. There's no financial training, how to run a business, how to run your household, how to pay your bills. Children that come through services often that will move into independent living after, say, foster care, often don't even know what council tax is. And we know that council tax recovery is the most aggressive form of county court recovery that we've seen since COVID. So if we don't know how to run our finances and we don't know how to manage our law, our life as a civil human, then the two things put together, when you mismanage your money and then you end up in court for your council tax, well, there we are. There's no wonder people feel overwhelmed. The thing that's probably positive for me, I think this is a double-edged sword, however, is the evolution of AI and assistive technologies, because many of my dyslexic, dyspraxic, autistic individuals with ADHD, those with a learning difference, who perhaps couldn't articulate effectively in a way that other people could understand, are more and more in our industry starting to get access to assistive technologies because we're pushing for it, we're vying for it through access to work and access to education, because I really feel that those tools used carefully and trained properly really will start to give people without a voice and without a capacity to write and read in the same way, the legalese, etc., a fighting chance. Do you see that happening in the justice system, and do you think there's going to be an effect from it?
Well, they've already started the campaign. I think it was 2025, a campaign the government in order to bring more AI and emerging technologies into the justice system.
Right.
You know, now we're talking about a system that's primarily paper-based still.
Yeah.
You know, so you know that's going to be a bit of a journey for them because they're still working on traditional systems such as paper-based systems, as opposed to more digital systems. It's getting better, but it's a slow moving wheel.
Sticky noted bundles is what I see in court.
What's that?
Sticky noted bundles is what I see.
Sticky noted bundles. Yeah.
With different coloured sticky notes to find out which page they're in.
It is changing, and it is a lot more accessibility there, but there's still a lot that needs to be done.
Yeah.
With the AI and emerging technologies themselves, you know, there are going to be systems that I can see in there that I'm quite positive about it. But I can see why other legal professionals, legal organizations are skeptical, because it does bring a lot of risks. For instance, my one main thing, which I'll say to everybody now, is if you've got a legal issue, if it's got any level of complexity other than the very basic stuff, don't use ChatGPT. Just don't.
Hallucinations are us.
It hallucinates. It invents laws that don't exist. If you don't know what you're looking for, or don't know how to read it, which most people don't, unfortunately, you know, it'll cause a lot of mistakes. And one of the biggest things me and my team struggle with at the moment is explaining to people that ChatGPT is wrong. No, it's a big, but it does an extremely good job of convincing people it's right. And it does. And if you read some of the stuff that it comes out with, but then when you do the legal check, and obviously we know because we've got a lot of experience dealing with a lot of people anyway, but then we always cross-reference what we're reading, and it's a lot of it is make believe. You don't want to be taken out. Well, we know people have gone into court, they've had it thrown out, they've had adverse costs, they've had all kinds of issues by using that program. I believe in time there will be specialist programs in AI. I think it will take time, but because there's certain things it needs to use. And always remember, with AI, it's a supportive tool, as in the fact of, you know, realistically, we don't want AI making decisions on cases for you. You need somebody who's fair-minded and reasonable in all the circumstances, such as a judge, legal people, legal professionals who know what they're talking about and can take everything into account, as opposed to just some inputs you've put in there or documents they've uploaded, and it's give you these kind of factual and infactual accuracies and inaccuracies, and then you're kind of in that position of being, you know, of being convinced you're going down one route, and realistically you could be going down seven which are completely wrong and giving you that wrong information. And we don't want it. Realistically, I think AI will be a good assistive tool, but we really don't want AI telling you, giving you legal advice. You know, you need somebody who's taking everything.
Well, you need somebody sentient, somebody that's thinking. ChatGPT can't think; it can only data scrape and put together information. Well, words. Based on a request, based on a command, based on a prompt, but it's not thinking. It's not considering the subtleties or the nuances or the various people involved in those very important situations. And it is all about people, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that for me, I was going to ask you about mindset, but I think the only way through this kind of process is to get the right advice, is to prepare well, and to prepare for the worst, Expect good, but prepare for the worst.
Yeah,
Summary
absolutely.
of what you've said so far.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's just managing people's expectations in the fact of making sure the people that the legal system is the last place you want something to be into. There's other routes first. You should always explore. Most things can be, and this is something which we've demonstrated time and time again. Most things can be settled without going to court. You just need to know how to do it, and if you do know, that's all the better. If you need support, most organizations, legal firms, supporting organization, not-for-profits like ourselves, CIC companies, charities, they will help you with with being able to put a complaint together, and submit the complaint or professional complaint. That can usually resolve situations. If it doesn't, then there are other routes. So realistically, the court should be the thing. If you get early advice, you can resolve situations
Early.
very, very quickly. And that is the main. If you can take anything from this conversation, is get that the earlier the better you can get the advice. Usually, the quicker the situation can be resolved and helped. Not in every circumstance, and some circumstances can be highly emotive. But again, it's always best to try to resolve it through them routes first, and you'll be pleasantly surprised on what you can achieve just through that alone. But then if you need to navigate that system, we are here. I would never advocate for anybody going to court without legal support or legal advice.
Absolutely. And I knew we would. We've got so much to talk about. When we get together, Dane, we could talk until the cows come home, as they say. But I think in summary, what we're saying to people today is, look, start early, get your information together. If there is a challenge, make sure you're taking documents, make sure you're taking, the evidence, keeping a record of what's going on, just in case. Have a look at your insurance to see if you've got any cover. And then I would guess, contact the Community Law Project if you don't have another way of finding out what you're entitled to or how you should go. There's two questions I've got, and we are at the top of the hour, but we can do what we like, right? We're free humans in the UK. We can spend an extra 5 minutes on social media. It's not yet illegal. Two questions. The first one is, how do people get a hold of you in particular, but your team? And then, just as a fun question, and if you look back on all of our podcasts, this question I've given to everyone, basically because I've got two of them myself. Sounds a bit dodgy, you don't know what I'm going to ask you, but if I was to give you, and I have two, so you could have one, a magic wand for 5 minutes, once we know what your contact details are, what would you do with it? What changes would you make? And you've only got 5 minutes, so you're going to have to be quite sparing with your wishes. So how do we get hold of you, and what would you do if I gave you a magic wand?
Okay, then. So to get hold of us, all you need to do is contact you can look at our website, which is the nationalcommunitylawproject.com, or you can email us at inquiries@thenationalcommunitylawproject.com. And then all our details, our contact details, our numbers will be on there as well.
I'll put them in the show notes as well for people.
Yeah,
afterwards.
Absolutely. We assist people in England and Wales and Northern Ireland. There are some things we can help with in Scotland, but they just brought out a new act, so we'd have to have a conversation to see if you've got some issues which we can help with in that circumstance. Yes, and if I had a magic wand, what I would do, the main things would be create from a stage level would be, number one, to ensure that that legal education was in schools, colleges, and throughout higher education, especially around specific areas. If people are learning that, some do in higher education, but it's very, very specific. People need to understand their fundamental rights, their fundamental responsibilities, their liberties, and understand what the justice system actually is, and how the legal system, not just the legal system, Parliament, the legal system and the Crown operate in that way. And that is the foundation of our democracy. That is our constitution. Although it's unwritten, it forms our constitution. The second bit would be simplify the language. If there was a magic wand, it would be simplify the legalese. Also, and then in order for people to understand that, and then when it comes to the legal processes, it would be make sure that it's fully funded, everyone got access if they do need courts and they do need tribunals. Like I said, there are other remedies available at the moment that are free, such as ombudsman and some professional organisations as well that can help you look into issues. But fundamentally, the justice system needs to be updated. The courts themselves need to be updated. They need to be more. They need to also have access to this, both digital inclusion, as well as people who can potentially be excluded from this digital exclusion. It needs to be funded, and the civil procedure rules need to be simplified and made more applicable to actual persons and litigants if it's going to go this way. Other than that, it would be completely reinstated, repeal the Elasbo Act as it is with the restrictions, reinstate legal aid, so then people can go to and get legal support for all issues and all disputes that are being raised if it gets to the point of where it needs to go to court or tribunal.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell you what, I'm going to give you a magic wand for longer than 5 minutes if you can do that in 5 minutes. I'm telling you now that, I think that for it to be fair, to be understandable, to be accessible, and for people to know what the hell it's about before they start coming foul, falling foul of behaviours that perhaps they don't even understand, aren't okay. At the end of the day, if we don't educate people, how can we expect them to take their rights and their responsibilities seriously? Look, I think that this hour has been packed with information. I'm going to go and listen back to this. It's going to come out as a podcast. It'll come out as a video cast. Your words will be cut up into reels, and so you'll see yourself all over social media in a few weeks, just with sound bites to help people. It's so much fun, isn't it, seeing yourself live on social media? I love it not. But look, we're trying to educate. We want to engage and inform people, and we want really to empower people to be able to take their life into their own hands and create a life that they deem is worth living, don't we? So I'm grateful to you and everyone else that comes on here as my guest. I am honoured by the amount of people that agree to come and spend an hour of their life on a Friday night, particularly the first of the month, which is when we have it, first Friday live at 5. I am always honoured by the guests that we have, and a lot of great people go behind you, and a lot of great people will come after you, but I couldn't be more grateful for you to be here today. So thank you for joining us, Dane. And yeah,
thank you so
to
much,
everyone that you are welcome, to everyone that is online, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, here in the chat, and those that have been lurking in the studio. I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting us. And any questions, ping Dane a question, email them, go and have a look at the Community Law Project. The stuff will be in the show notes when this comes out. And if you don't know how to get hold of him, get hold of me, and we'll make sure that you get a hold of him. You've been in First Friday Live. We won't be here for another month. I will see you in another month. I'm going to say goodbye to Dane and goodbye to you all right now. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a fantastic Easter weekend, and I will see you, well, in a month. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
You are welcome. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.